Nama Amitofu, and welcome to the Buddha Dharma TV Sunday program. I am Lisa Chu. Today we will start with a Dharma talk, followed by a song and our weekly Dhammapada session. The Dharma talk is by Venerable Luang Por Viradamo, who is a Canadian monk in the Thai forest tradition of Theravada Buddhism. He was ordained as a monk in 1974 by Ajahn Chah at Wat Nong Papong Monastery and became one of the first residents at Wat Pa Nanachat, the international monastery in northeast Thailand. Let us respectfully invite the Venerable to share the Dharma with us.
Very nice to be with you, and I'm always I have a great amount of joy when I come here because you do such significant work for the sasana. You create community, and of course you make this beautiful welcoming gestures whenever I come here, so that's very touching and very heart-opening. As you probably know, I just finished a retreat earlier at Wisdom Park. It's a fabulous piece of architecture, and all the trees that you've planted, and the simplicity of the lines of the pillars, and the simplicity of the meditation hall. It's architecturally very impressive. And then the service that the Nalanda group gave us in the kitchen, and it's just amazing. It's very, very touching. So as meditators, it makes you want to meditate harder, doesn't it? Like, I have to earn this. These people are working very, very hard, and they're not asking for any remuneration. So that's kind of how service can elevate. That's how dana can elevate the person who's receiving the dana. Certainly, I found that in Thailand, that although when I was in Wat Pah Pong, the economy there was very poor. People lived a very, very basic life, but they weren't poor in spirit, and they weren't starving. I mean, they were quite healthy, but their diet wasn't quite what I was used to. Let's put it that way. And then I'd kind of see people working in the fields, because they were still using water buffalo then, and men would be up to their thighs in mud. You know how difficult. They were really, really strong men, and then the women would be weaving or making brooms or whatever, and I would go pinned apart through these villages, and their faith and generosity then helped me get through my own difficulties and my own cultural challenges and so on. So as a community, that way all the activities that we do, whether it's meditation or dana, are all serving a kind of higher purpose, and that purpose is the liberation of the individual, because liberation isn't a communal activity. You can't liberate the mind as a group. You have to do it individually. Obviously, that's self-evident. But it's very, very helpful to have a group that supports the same ethos, that encourages all the standards of dana and sila that we all live by. So you get a kind of momentum that is bigger than the individual. I think we all know, practicing as an individual, it's very hard if you don't have kalyanamitta, if you don't have routines and structures and so forth. And that's basically what I found as a bhikkhu. I didn't know what I was getting into. I had no idea what I was getting into, but I just had this strange faith outside my culture, really, to want to be a bhikkhu. And then I was so fortunate to discover Luang Cha and Wat Pah Pong. And that was more than just Luang Cha. It was a whole society which encouraged anyone aspiring to enlightenment, anyone aspiring to the values of enlightenment would be encouraged and helped on that kind of a path. So I was so fortunate, because if I would have tried to figure this out on my own, I would have lasted a month. It couldn't have lasted very, very long, because my habits and my culture were not kind of supportive of those things. The thing about Luang Por Chah was that he was socially very competent, because quite often you think of someone like Ajahn Chah and you read his teachings and you kind of hear about his personality, so you kind of see him as a very powerful individual, which he was. But he really understood his culture. He understood how to use rituals, how to use the Vinaya, how to use his own authority. Because a monk like Ajahn Chah has tremendous authority in the countrysides of northeast Thailand, tremendous authority, and he knew how to use that. In other words, he knew how to use his own power in a way which is hugely beneficial to that society. So when I walked into Wat Pah Pong, I walked into a whole new culture and a being who was kind of in charge. He wasn't the governor of the province, but it was Ajahn Chah land. And what I saw was that with a leader like that, you could accomplish a lot, because of course his value system was so profoundly wise and profoundly connected to the land, to the earth, to the water, to the society, to the people. It wasn't abstract. So although Ajahn Chah had certainly read texts, his teaching wasn't a kind of he wasn't a scholar or a lecturer. He didn't teach in that way. He taught about mangoes and fish and trees and suffering that we have, and so on and so forth. So he grounded it in the ordinary experience of life, and that was tremendously helpful. I've Sister Nandini, others told me that you're involved in a 24-hour Metta Bhavana fest, or I don't know what you call it, marathon or a metathon or something like that. And you realize, of course, we have to do this 24/7 for our whole lives, because the Buddhist teaching is not an easy one. It has a really high standard, And that high standard, there's a danger of a high standard, is that we attach to idealism. So the ideal is that we have loving kindness for each other all the time. Then the reality is not that. We feel irritated, we feel annoyed, we feel frightened, we feel jealous, we feel depressed. And so idealism is fine, but it has to be grounded in reality. And the reality of the way things are is the way things are. If I have an ideal that I should always like you and I don't like you, what do I do with that? I suppress it, I smile, but underneath I'm not processing my dislike. The other way is I just express my dislike and insult you. That's not on either. That's not the ideal, that's just indulgence. So the middle way is to awaken to the reality of one's own emotional being, and yet try to live in a cultural sense which does as little harm as possible and maximum good as possible. And that's honesty. You have to be we all have to be very honest about our own inner world. And the teachings on Metta Bhavana I take them twofold. I take them on a level of social interaction, that I try to have loving kindness to all the beings that I come in contact with, but I also try to take it on the level of flow of consciousness. So I can experience my life as a duality. So I'm sitting here, and then I can see the camera over there, right? So I'm here, that's there. But also, if I'm practicing dependent origination or anatta, I can see that visual perception has depth, has color, has a sense of the perspective, me here, that there, but that can be known as an object in awareness. You get that? Yeah? So that's what I call flow of consciousness. And I live my life, our dharmic life, in both ways. So sure, there is space, and there is distance, and there is sound, but all of that is arising and ceasing in awareness, in consciousness. And that's when we talk about anatta, or dependent origination. When we talk about dana and sila, we talk about me and you. I am a monk, I have my responsibilities, I have my rules, and I can't just say, well, let's get drunk tonight. It's all anatta. No. Not a good idea. Or something more absurd. So I have a social responsibility. I have a social responsibility to speak in a particular way, but also I have a contemplative responsibility to understand my own heart and mind. Otherwise, I'll never be free. If my bhikkhu activity in my social relationships is only external, if I'm only a teacher, or I'm only a builder, or I'm only whatever, writer, and I haven't addressed the core of my being and understood it, then I haven't really practiced Buddhism. I've practiced some kind of social ethic, which might be good, but I haven't got to the core of the teaching, and the core of the teaching is always inwards. So we have this outward side of our lives. I relate to you here, and I try to do my best, you try to do your best, and then I have the inward side, which is, how am I reacting now? What's going on inwards? And you can do both. We do both, don't we? Otherwise you'd just be very indulgent. So like if someone were kind of, let's say, take a gross example, when I started to teach outside of Thailand, and I would kind of I used to take invitations to go anywhere, because we had to kind of get to be known. And I regretted a lot of those invitations, because I ended up once, it was a technical college in London, and I didn't know what I was getting into. And I walk into this technical, and it's one of those lecture halls that go up, right? So I walk in this lecture hall, and everyone's above me. And they're down below, what's going on? And then I noticed at the back row, there were like 5 or 6 guys with their legs up on desks reading newspapers. I said, this isn't good. This is not looking good at all. And so I had to be very strict and so on. And then during that talk, someone challenged me. How do you know? You don't know anything. You're not in the world. You're just a monk. Oh, okay. So not only was there the social engagement, but there was the inner reactivity, kind of confused or challenged or frightened or whatever. And we all have that, don't we? And you need to do both, obviously. We need to do the best we can socially, but really, really learn about our inner behavior and how to find freedom inside. So what happens is, in our social engagement, our buttons get pressed. So my bhikkhu proprietary button, how people should treat a bhikkhu, was definitely pressed in that situation. This is not the norm. And I didn't have an upatak to kind of beat everyone up and keep them in line. I was just there on my own. So my sense of how it should be was that way, and then how it was here was this way. And that's good for me. That was very, very good for me, because, as a bhikkhu in Thailand, you're treated like you're God or something. It's like over the top. I don't mind. I prefer that to the lecture hall. But it's a bit unrealistic sometimes because I'm just a human being and, I do stupid things like everyone else. But to actually be in a situation where no one respects me or very few people respect me, I think the professor did. He was the only one. And to be in a situation where I'm not comfortable, where I'm not liked, where I'm challenged in some kind of, is very good for me. As long as it's not dangerous, obviously. If you send me to the war front in Ukraine, I'm not going to do that. But just in the ordinary sensibility, oh, wow, look at that. So I can't take for granted people's respect, or I can't take for granted that people will be interested in what I'm talking about. And I hadn't faced much of that in Thailand. I had just faced my own things. And then, oh, okay. But if you're practicing inner vigilance, inner attention, you're aware of both, aren't you? If you're not aware of both, then what happens? You just react. And then you're in even more trouble because you're just in a kind of reactive mode, either suppressing things or expressing them in inadequate ways. This is self-evident, but it's always good just to remember that our practice is social and individual, both ways. And individual isn't about being selfish. It's about being wise. It's about self-understanding rather than narcissism. It's not narcissistic to think, I'm confused. Confusion feels this way. So in that individual way of functioning, in that way of understanding yourself, what we're trying to reflect upon is we're trying to get a model of contemplation which always emphasizes that this whole scene is happening in awareness, which isn't control. Control is different. Control is me making sure that I don't trip on this ledge. That is one kind of mindfulness. It's the mindfulness of not breaking my leg, which I call functional mindfulness. But the mindfulness of the heart is the awakening to the inner urges you have, to the fears and desires and jealousies and loves and hates that we all experience, and becoming more and more in contact with that, but not taking it personally. So the personal level is, if I feel angry at you, the personal level is I try to practice right speech. But on the inner individual level, if I feel angry, it is anger. It's a sankhara that arises, hangs in for a while, and then ceases. And it's not me. It's not me, it's not mine. And that's very important. Otherwise, you never liberate this from the heart. If you think it's you, this anger, then you just try to do metta bhavana. May you be well, may you be well. I hate you, may you be well, may you be well. You get very confused because you're trying to override what you're feeling with some ideal. The ideal is a social contract that we have to try to be honest and live by sila and take care of each other. But the inner contemplation is not a social contract. It's awareness of change as it arises and ceases, and where's there suffering in that? Where's the suffering come when I do that? And what we all face realistically is we have buttons. Someone can press my authority button, or someone can press my anxiety button, or etc., etc. And when our buttons get pressed, if we have a good inner vigilance going all the time, then that releases something. It releases some sense of ego, some sense of self. And when it releases it, if you're patient with it, then it goes away from the kind of karmic tendencies you have in the mind. You're liberated. You're liberated from that for the time being. So liberation, in that sense, is not easy. But it's not like you're trying to get something called liberation, but you're knowing the feeling of anger in this sense, or fear, and you're patiently witnessing it as anicca dukkha anatta. It's not me, it's not mine, don't grasp it. It arose for a cause, it'll stay for a while, it'll cease. That takes tremendous patience and honesty. It's a lot of work. But what happens if you do that? Then the tendency, in this case anger, and so many other things, the tendency towards anger then lessens. And the tendency towards awareness of Dhamma, Sati Sampajanya, gets strengthened through your willingness to endure the sometimes the unendurable, the difficult. Again, if you have an ideal that you should, that feeling anger, this is, I think, one common misperception people sometimes have, is that non-attachment means you'll never get angry. Hence, I'm doing the anger and I'm attached and I'm wrong. That's not true. Because you don't wake up in the morning and think, I think I'll do anger at around 4:30. It's a great idea, right? And then at 2:30 I'll do gratitude. And then it doesn't work that way. It works the way it works, according to nature. So if anger's triggered in you, it's not your fault. Or you can see how it might have been a habit that you got caught up into in a lifetime. It might come from childhood or whatever, but it's not deliberate. It's just karmic stuff coming up. So then you do have a responsibility, and the responsibility is non-grasping. And what is non-grasping? It's actually fully feeling the emotion. That's the strain. People think non-grasping is like, I'm always cool. Nothing affects me. I'm super upeka guy, right? You can't touch it. But who is like that? No, I don't know anyone like that. So maybe you read about some super monk who's like, you know, a tiger can bite his leg off and he's fine with that. May you be well and happy to the tiger. But I mean, life doesn't work that way. Life works this way. So we do get angry and we do have fears. And there's nothing. That is not who you are. It's just the anusaya or the vipaka. So the challenge is to witness that within the context of good social relationships. If you witness it, then it begins to cease in the mind. This is what we mean by nirodha. The tendencies towards greed, hatred, and delusion begins to fall away, fall away, fall away. But the pathway takes a lot of patience and this is where I think the word metta goes beyond the social. This is where the word metta is acceptance. Because I have to accept into the mind anything that the mind throws up. If the mind throws up, I want to rob a bank or something silly like that, that's natural. If you feel, if a mother doesn't like her child one day, fine, that's natural. Why should you love your child all the time? But I mean, if you tell other parents, actually, she drove me crazy today. I wish she'd go away. No, I love her all the time. But you don't. How can you love someone all the time? It's not possible. So, but if you are honest with what you're feeling, then you will relate in a loving way. But you're also say, it's okay not to like. It's okay to be fed up or whatever. Then you'll liberate that from the mind. So that's the honesty of metta as awareness. So I've always, not always, but my early years of Sangha life, I began to really notice that to be true awareness, it must accept all things and reject none. To be true awareness. Otherwise, it's just judgment and criticism, which is intellectual. So judgment and criticism is important, and it tells me, don't act on the anger. Don't speak from anger. Don't hurt anyone from anger. But the heart has to accept all things because it's natural. And if you don't accept it, of course, you get caught in the dualities of idealism, and you never liberate the mind. It's always under there, always kind of plaguing you from the background. So metta, awareness, I began to develop that in two ways. One is in the interpersonal, to try to be kind. It felt the best. It felt much better than being grumpy all the time. So it has its profit, it has its joy, kindness. But then, the attitudes I had to my own fears and desires and jealousies was very critical. Come on here, Dhammo, get your act together. Why were you so angry then? Or what's with the fear? And, so I didn't have enough metta to these very conditions which came and went, these beings that come into consciousness. And then Luang Por Sumedho, through his suggestion, no, you have to welcome the unwelcome. Yeah, you have to welcome the unwelcome. And what's unwelcome is your own anger, your own fear, your own jealousy. You don't want that. You think, oh, go away. I don't want that garbage. I just want love. Right? But what is love? In this sense, I think if it's awareness, it accepts all things and rejects none. So for me, it took that insight was terribly important, my understanding of how to use this lifetime as a kind of contemplative vehicle, and how to understand myself in a way which was accepting. And then, once you've done that, then you can start to gauge, okay, here's anger, what's the thinking around it? Then you start to be really aware, then you can work with it. So for me, it wasn't like anger was kind of came and went, but the real issue was more around fear and anxiety. That was my major issue. So as I began to accept that into the mind, then I could say, oh, fear feels this way. Then I could investigate it as a bodily sensation, because I wasn't trying to get rid of it. I could see the language that I was creating around the anxiety and fear created more anxiety and fear. I could see the narratives of fear in relation to others and situations. In other words, I began to see the whole package of fear and anxiety as a thing, as an object, changing object, arising and ceasing in consciousness. And that's when I began to unravel the wrong thinking, the wrong narratives that I ran with. And so that the tendencies towards fear and anxiety came up. I would endure them, understand them, feel them in the body. They'd go, until they really kind of ceased in my mind. So I didn't understand that when I started. I just thought, I'm just going to meditate and not have any fear. Good luck, Charlie. It doesn't work that way. So Luang Por Chah, I'd be meditating and all these confused emotions, and I'm trying to do anapanasati to get rid of them, control. And Luang Por Chah just shook his head. He says, listen, you've been a hippie for 3 years. You arrive here. You've been here 1 month and you want to be the Buddha. You should give up. Just endure. And that was what he said. He said, just oton. Is that all I get from the great master? Just endure? He says, well, what else are you going to do? Live a good life, live a socially responsible life, and witness the karma of your mind from not having trained the mind. Okay, and I had great faith in him. So I expected him to give some really cool technique. While you do this and you do that, and then you do this, tweak this, and boing, you'll be enlightened. Oton, endure. And the thing I could see in Luang Por Chah was that he was fearless. And I had a lot of fear, so I thought, wow, if that's what he says I have to do, I'll do that. But also, he was a very loving being. It was interesting, like in male communities, monks, strong men, he could really push us fearlessly, but with love, like a good coach, I would say, on a football team or something. He can really push his students in a way which was much respected by us. And just to return to this 24 hours of metta, to that theme, is you can see really it is a 24/7 operation. Because if I say, okay, I'll just do metta, I think like a couple hours a day should be sufficient. Or if I do 20 minutes in the morning, that's nice. What about the rest of the day? Because if you see metta as awareness of the way things are, it means acceptance, then that has to be developed 24/7. But if you see metta as a kind of technique, you get your list. There's my mom, dad, the dog. Then who do I do? Then I do the neighbors maybe. Then I have to do those enemies too. Okay, I'll do the enemies. And then all insects. Okay, I've got my list and done. Come on. That's just intellectual, right? That's in the thought mind. It can bring you to the heart. But when I relate to you, you are not an abstract. You're a real human being, blood and guts human being. And the thing about Luang Por Chah is you could see he was with each person he was with, in the moment with the person. And they weren't some abstract thing. Have ever any of you heard the Dalai Lama speak or been with him? He's a great inspiration to me. He's just the most fabulously ordinary, loving being. His love of humanity it's like Uncle Dalai Lama. You know, it's like the uncle that you've always wanted. And he gave a talk in Auckland. I was I was there. And this is way back for me, 1987. And he said something. He said, compassion is the method. And I hadn't thought of it that way. It's the method. You know, sometimes if we see these hard things as a practice, right? It's a kind of thing you do, you know, like eating durian. It's a kind of, but as a method, then, oh yeah, when I can accept the way things are, my own fears, then that's compassion. It's the method. And then because in stream of consciousness, I'm emphasizing that rather than the negativity that comes there, then stream of consciousness becomes imbued with compassion. It becomes compassionate. The trajectory is I have to be compassionate to my own negativity and not hate myself, not judge myself, not constantly be on my case. And that was the big problem I had, and I don't know how it is for all of you, but certainly my fellow monks from kind of Western traditions, we were very self-critical. We're very judgmental because we've been trained intellectually to be critical. And that's how you become an engineer or an architect or learn how to do computers. So you have a very critical mind. Whereas this sense of open awareness, trusting in the way things are, being aware, allowing things to be there, is not a judgment. It's not an analysis. It's not a position about how you should or shouldn't be. So it's an important counterpart to the intellectual mind. The intellectual mind, once you get the heart open and you accept things there, then you can use the intellect. Okay, what might I do to enhance compassion and not get caught up into the narratives of my own delusions? That's the use of intellect. But if intellect is coming from an aversion to yourself, a bias that you shouldn't be the way you are, then that won't work because it's wrong understanding. So right understanding, first and foremost, is awakening to the way things are. It's like this. I feel like this. That's right understanding. You understand. It's not an intellectual position you take. Like in terms of samadhi, I prefer right understanding as opposed to right view. Right view to me is always a kind of position I take. But you feel what you feel. It's a viewpoint, you could say, but it's just this way. Good, bad, indifferent. Once I do that, then that's presence. That's awareness. And then from that, I can try to enhance the beautiful and let go of the troublesome. So, you know, seeing His holiness and connecting with Him, I realized that that's what I need to do in this lifetime. Each person I meet, I have to see them as a human being. Not junior, not senior, not Muslim, not Buddhist, not male, not female, not big, not small. Not someone I want to get something out of, or something that wants to get something out of me. And that is the challenge of metta, that it's like always, you're always trying to do it, whether it's the shopkeeper or someone junior in your hierarchy or someone senior. Because when we have hierarchies of culture, so you have hierarchies of elders, these can be very beautiful because we respect our elders and so on. But then sometimes they can be filled with fear too. And the fearfulness is something that all structures need to work with. I certainly work with that in monasticism. Sometimes monastic cultures, because we have a very strong hierarchy, you can see sometimes that a junior monk will relate to a senior monk in a very respectful way, but a junior monk will relate to a novice in a disrespectful way. If I see that, I'm just like on their case right away. Why can't you love him like you love me? Huh? What's wrong with him? So I used to kind of play a game. I mean, I can't do this all the time. I can be pretty grumpy too. I mean, I'm human, but I do try. But I would sometimes, I'd say, like, if I'm getting uptight with someone, would you get this uptight with Ajahn Chah? Or would you get this uptight with your mom? Or something? I bring up someone I really loved and respected. Well, probably not. I wouldn't get away with it. So that kind of work on like an ongoing basis of how am I relating to humanity, person by person, rather than an abstract. Can I tell you, Joyce, am I okay to tell the Afghani story one more time? Can I tell you my Afghani story? You haven't heard it? Oh, you were on the retreat. Okay, if you've heard it, then don't leave. That's a good. So, I've been conditioned through Western culture to see Islam as a being jihadist. Okay, that's the kind of media. And yet I have a great love of Sufism and the love poetry of Rumi and that, that part of Islam, which is very beautiful and very pluralistic and so on. I have a friend who lives in Ottawa, and she works for UNHCR and does refugee work in all kinds of places. And we've worked with her to help a orphanage in Cambodia, and then she contacted us about a year and a half ago and told us about a Afghani family which was trying to escape Afghanistan after the Americans pulled out of Afghanistan, and the Taliban were after them. So one man is a doctor, he's a director of the hospital, and had done pediatric surgery, all kinds of surgery for 25 years. His wife was a gynecologist. His brother was a public health doctor, so they're very involved in the caring part of Afghani society. And they had a run for it. They would have been killed. They made it to Pakistan, and they needed help. And eventually we were part of the fundraising group, and we got them to Canada. And they got refugee status, and they got set up really, really nicely in Canada. And then we thought, well, we should go see them and bring them some food, because monasteries usually get too much good food, thanks to you. And then one of the monks told me he was going to Toronto to teach a retreat with an Ambedkar Buddhist group, and he said he knew of an Afghani food store in Toronto. He was from Toronto, and then we said, oh wow, let's get them some Afghani food. And then Usha, who organized the retreat in Toronto, said, yeah, we'll support that, let's go. And so they went to the food store, and Usha just kept saying, buy more, buy more, buy more. This is like this lovely heart of generosity. And they ended up buying $800 worth of food, which is a lot of food. And it was just coming up to Eid. Do you use the word Eid? After the fasting? What do you call it? After Ramadan? Eid. Same word? Yeah? Break fast? Not breakfast. Break fast. Okay. We use the word Eid. So it was a big time for them, and they had no resources. They're okay. So we then went and visited them. We had these bags of this best stuff, because it was Afghani food. And they were so happy. They were just so happy that I think all of us were in tears. They're like, it was just so lovely, this kind of union of two cultures but no culture, right? So then they invited us for a meal. And we said, oh, okay. And we decided to eat at the table, because we didn't want to walk in with our alms bowls and they, what are you? Huh? And so we sat at table, and the women were serving and the men were there, and we had this lovely, interesting discussion. And we wanted to get some kind of religious dialogue going without becoming, dogmatic and doctrinal. And they certainly weren't of that nature. And so I asked our Venerable Amar Siri to look up, he's very fluent in many languages, but he looked up in Google Translate, the Dari language is the Afghani language, and he looked up the unconditioned, the unoriginated, the unformed, the deathless, which is the way we talk about Nibbana. So that's from the Udana, from the Nibbana Sutta. So we got those words, and somehow, I don't know how he managed to get this in the Dari language, and we showed them, so, because we had a kind of broken conversation all the time with Google Translates, but we said, so are these words significant to you? So they read them and said, Allah. Really? Wow. And I said, well, why not? So mystical Abrahamic religions have a way of talking about God. There's a very good book called The History of God by an author called Karen Armstrong. And I went through that and I saw, the way that mystic Judaism, Christianity, and Islam speak of their highest attainments are very close to the way we talk about the unconditioned, the uncreated, the unoriginated, the unformed, which to me is quite fascinating, because most of religious dialogue becomes dogmatic. You believe these silly, narrow things. But in any case, it was just lovely to see, And then I showed them a picture of our monastery, other monasteries of the Buddha Rupa. And I said, this is a symbol, not an idol, because that's the big hang-up with those traditions. And he said, symbol, okay, we get it, no problem. So we had a lovely dana, we did some chanting for them. The mother, the elderly mother, she did a doha for us, a prayer, and we left such good friends. So then they said, well, we have to come to the monastery to offer dana. Now, I never thought that an Afghani would come to offer dana at a Buddhist monastery. But why not? So we arranged that. We had 3 or 4 cars. We brought all the family out, and they were so happy. They hadn't been out in the country. The kids were playing with a dog, and we brought them down to the lake, and they prepared a fabulous meal. But then we did like bhikkhus do. We sat on the floor. They were in the shrine room. We did the chanting. They listened, kind of happy. So they're right in the shrine room, right? No problem. Then they went and they ate with the lay people. And the kind of final piece of this was the mother, the elderly mother. She said, if I lived near here, I'd be here every week offering you food. So I cried. And so there, the kind of the biases we can have and the fears we can have around. And I realized that I had a lot of hidden prejudices because of all the information I had, which was part of the story, but it wasn't the whole story, because the whole story is you and I relating to each other rather than my preconceived notion of who you are. And I found that a kind of important kind of lesson in my own life. So metta bhavana, it's a very, very profound word. It's not just a technique. It's a deep word about understanding yourself and then relating to others. And then when you can't relate to others from metta bhavana, if you go away to your own space, you say, that didn't feel right. I was too controlling. I was too submissive. I was whatever. That didn't feel right. And you go back to that feeling with kindness. Oh, that didn't feel right. Okay, I'll stay with that, with metta, because then what you're putting into that whole thing is metta. Even though maybe you were rude to someone, go back to your space and say, oh, this is the result of rudeness. This hurts. I didn't want to do that. But go here, don't go here. If you go here, oh, I'm terrible, I'm rude again, that's more anger. That's more self-hatred. Well, there's a whole bunch of thinking for you. So I'll leave those ideas with you.
We would like to present a Buddhist song titled We Shall Overcome by Wayfarers.
We shall all overcome. We shall all overcome. We shall all overcome the greed in us. We shall all overcome. We shall all overcome. We shall all overcome the hate in us. We shall conquer illusions and find true liberty, that which leads us through this troubled sea. We shall go beyond the shore, be peaceful evermore, 'cause we cry and sigh no more. And together we'll see everlasting peace, when all our fear and worry cease. We shall all overcome. We shall all overcome. We shall all overcome the greed in us. We shall all overcome. We shall all overcome. We shall all overcome the hate in us. We shall conquer illusions and find true liberty, that which leads us through this troubled sea. We shall go beyond the shore, be peaceful evermore, 'cause we cry and sigh no more. And together we'll see everlasting peace, when all our fear and worry cease. We shall all overcome. We shall all overcome the fear in us. We shall all overcome. We shall all overcome. We shall all overcome the doubts in us. Clear away our minds' confusion, ever watchful till the end. Bravely walk our way to freedom land. We shall dwell in peace and love, rejoicing evermore. Rejoice, we have found the Lord. By this law shall we live, through this law shall we see the joy and peace of being free.
Now, it is time for the weekly Dhammapada sermon, a collection of sayings of Buddha, which is one of the best-known Buddhist scriptures and most widely read. The weekly Dhammapada verse 90 will be presented by Venerable Professor Bhante Sivali. Let us welcome Bhante Sivali to present a brief sermon of the Dhammapada verse 90.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Good evening. Welcome to the Buddha Dharma TV to listen to the Dhammapada verse number 90. It is the first verse of the chapter 7, Arahanta Vagga in Pali language, which is in English the chapter on the saints. The chapter 7 begins with a verse called Gatadhino Visokassa Vipamuttassa Sabbadhi Sabba Ganta Pahinassa Parilaho na vijjati. Parilaho na vijjati. That is, they are at the end journey's end. Journey means the long journey of samsara. We are traveling between birth and death, unlimited period of time, uncalculable period of time. So when we reach at the end of this long journey of samsara, that means when they are at the end of their long journey of samsara, means they are almost to be enlightened, to attain the enlightenment, to give up all these defilements, attachments, all this, and they are at that moment. So Buddha, this verse was uttered as a response to the question raised by Buddha's personal physician called Jivaka. Jivaka, of course, he appointed himself to be the Buddha's personal physician. So Buddha explained there that those who are at the journey's end, those who are at the end of the samsara, their quest for liberation has succeeded. They got rid of all knots and no bonds bind them in this law. Anxiety exists. And there is no anxiety. That's what is Gatadino is said about, who has fully traveled the road, long journey, who has gone all the way, and that person is the Arahat, one who has ended this long journey. It's called Arahat. There are two roads. That can be taken by humans. Two roads. One is the wilderness road. The other is the road through succeeding cycles of existence, which is samsara. The wilderness roads, there are 5 types of wilderness road. One is the bandit wilderness, which is dominated by plundering and murdering bandits, highway robbers. The second is the wilderness of wild beasts, forest beast, wild beasts, tigers, lions, bears, etc. Cheetahs. So we are afraid of even when you think of the names of these animals. So, yes, that is the wilderness of wild beasts. The ferocious beasts hold sway over it, control. Highways and wilderness, which is controlled by, dominated by plundering, murdering bandits called highway robbers. The second is the wilderness of beasts, wild beasts. And third one is a wilderness where there is no water for drinking or washing. The fourth is the wilderness of non-human and subhuman species. The kind of wilderness is dominated by devils or demons. And the fifth is the foodless wilderness. There are no edible things are found. No edible things are found. But when the arhats are described as gatadino, those who have traveled the road. What is the meant here is by the road? I mentioned at the beginning. The road through the cycle of existence. We travel a long journey, birth, death, birth, death, birth, death, unending journey. The arhats have completed their journey through this called samsara. They have come to the end of samsara. They have stopped the birth. Sabba ganta pahi nassa. To him, the arhats, who has given up all bonds. Bonds, there are 4 types of bonds. First is abhijja. The Pali word abhijja means covetousness, desiring the possessions of others. Right? Yeah. Second, vyapada, ill will, hatred, resentment, and anger towards others. Then the third is silabbata paramasa. First is abhijja, second vyapada, third is silabbata paramasa. Alienated discipline. Alienated discipline. And fourth, the bias that what I hold is entirely true and all others are untrue. These 4 bonds keep a person shackled to recurrent existence, samsara. Birth, death, the recurrent existence. We live, birth, and we enter to death. Birth, death, long journey of samsara. Because this is not our first birth. We have millions of previous births in different forms, of course. We don't know, we have never been, we cannot say we have never been animals. Somewhere, sometimes. It's so long traveling journey. So we cannot know it, but we have been indeed, because this is not our first life. We have been millions and trillions of years. These bonds, 4 bonds, keep a person shackled to recurrent existence called samsara. So when Jivaka, the personal physician of the Buddha, questioned Buddha, because once somebody just threw a rock at the Buddha and that hurt, a bit hurt, and Buddha's foot was bleeding. And Jivaka attended Buddha. And one day he asked, next day, how he was feeling, whether there was any pain. At that time, Buddha uttered this story, this verse. This Buddha pronounced this stanza of Jivaka. Jivaka himself was placed in a casket immediately after his birth. Jivaka, sometimes we hear this type of stories even now in many parts of the world. Undesired kids were born, unwanted, because certain rules and regulations prevent them from stopping before being pregnant. But those things are, of course, controversial issues that we do not want to discuss. But somehow, Jivaka was found on the road because someone immediately after his birth, Jivaka was placed in a casket and was cast away by his mother, a courtesan, right, on a dust heap by the roadside. It's a nice story to me. Prince Abhaya, a son of King Bimbisara, who happened to pass that way, saw the helpless infant surrounded by crows. The crows have come to peck something from there. Anyway, the Prince Abhaya, who was passing by, saw this helpless infant surrounded by crows, and discovering that he was alive, Jivati, he was alive, caused him to be given to the care of the nurses. As he was found alive, he was named Jivaka. That means alive, Jivaka. Being adopted by a prince, he was also given another name, Komara Bhacha, because he was adopted by a prince. Growing up, he became a skillful physician and surgeon. The story states, the commentaries state that he made 2 successful operations on a millionaire who was suffering from a severe headache. He used to attend on the Buddha 3 times a day, when in this instance the Buddha's foot was wounded by a splinter caused by the hurling of a rock by another monk called Devadatta. It was Jivaka who attended on him and healed him. Attended and healed him. So when Jivaka came one day, next day I think, to see the Buddha, he questioned Buddha whether you feel any pain. That's the time Buddha uttered this verse, that they are at the journey's end. Their quest for liberation has succeeded. They are sorrowless and totally released in mind. They have got rid of all knots and no bonds bind them. In them no anxiety exists. No anxiety exists. So it is good to know that there is a level that we can reach. The first stage is the Sotapatti. Second is Sakadagami. Third is Anagami, non-returner. Fourth is the Arahat, enlightened one. Arahat is the saint's level. Is no more humans. The saints attain to the supreme level. If we want to try that method, then we have to strive hard, work hard, and it is open for everyone. Open is the door for everyone. If someone tread the path of the Buddhas, then those who follow that path, tread that path, will be able to attain this level. 4 levels, one by one. When we attain the 4th level, Arahants, there is no more passions. And to that, I think I should discuss the 4 levels of enlightenment. Because to move forward, we do need to understand these 4 levels of enlightenment. First stage, second stage, third stage, and the final stage called Arahant. This chapter is named the Saints. Saints means Arahant, enlightened one. There are 4 stages. These 4 stages we better discuss in our next program. Right? So that it will be helpful for us to move forward and understand these levels, the path to the enlightenment, Arahants. So that's all for today. We will see you next week. May you all be well and happy.
We shall all overcome. We shall all overcome. We shall all overcome the greed in us. We shall all overcome. We shall all overcome. We shall all overcome the hate in us. We shall conquer illusions and find true liberty, that which leads us through this troubled sea.
That concludes today's program. If you have any questions about the contents of our broadcast, please feel free to reach out to us at info@buddhadharmatv.com. Our dedicated team remains committed to sharing the profound teachings of the Buddha, helping you walk the path of wisdom and enlightenment. Thank you for joining us. We look forward to seeing you again next week at the same time. Namo Buddhaya.